My name is Monica Gleberman, and you're listening to Silence on Set podcast. On today's podcast, we're talking to Ryan Hommel, who's the music director for Daisy Jones and the Six. The show takes place in 1977. Daisy Jones and the Six were on the top of the world. The band had risen from obscurity to fame, and then, after a sold-out concert at Chicago's Soldier Field, they called it quits. Now, decades later, the band members agree to reveal the truth. So to talk about what it was like being a musical director, here's Ryan Hummel. And I have to show you before we start, I have my Daisy Jones little
my
supportive
gosh,
shirt on.
look at that.
So it's her singing and she's reading the book.
That's
So
awesome.
how to show my support. I had to buy it and show my support of the show.
Amazing.
So
Wow.
very
Wow.
excited.
Team Daisy, I love it. Beautiful.
So I want to start off with, obviously I had found you on social media because I was seeing you doing posts,
Mhm.
and there's a lot of terms that get thrown around. And for people that are not familiar with the industry, we interview a lot of celebrities and they go, wow, that's amazing. They can sing, they can play, they can do all of
Yeah,
these things, but we don't talk about how that happens and the process of that. So can you talk a little bit about how you got attached to the project and what it is that, like, your title of, like, kind of related to the music, what it is that you do? Kind of explain it a little bit for
totally.
those that might not know.
Yeah, I get a lot of people asking me this question, or like, so the title music director is something that sort of can encompass so much, such a wide variety of things. But for this show, the way that I first came in was I got a call from Tony Berg, amazing producer, who is technically like a music consultant on the show, but was definitely there, every step of the way, working with Blake and creating the music and just helping facilitate the sort of recording process of the album and all the musical assets for the show. So he called me in December of 2019. I just moved to LA and didn't really have a whole lot going on yet. My wife and I just moved and we're super new. So it was a welcome call. And initially it was to just be a teacher, just be a guitar and a bass teacher, helping Riley and Josh and Will. We didn't even have Sam yet. And there was no Billy. So working with mostly just the three of them, guitar lessons for Josh Whitehouse. He knows a lot of music already. He's a great guitar player, great singer, great songwriter. So he and Will maybe had the most sort of music experience coming in. But my job was to just sort of direct them to the style, the 60s and 70s, the classic rock characters that they were going to be playing, and to try and get their musical chops up to snuff with that style. So there was a lot of like accumulating technique and accumulating just more specific nuanced stuff, because the ultimate goal is, hey, like, if the goal is for you to play this stuff on camera and be totally believable, then the goal should probably also be for you to be able to play the music, in real life and to become an actual band. So first of all, it was like, okay, come in, help these individual actors get to where they need to be on their instruments. And then as we went on and we ultimately, we got Sam Claflin as Billy, which was such a huge moment. And it was so cool to see the whole cast just sort of gel together immediately as a band. But what ended up happening was the private lessons, or like the 2 at a time lessons that I was doing with the cast, sort of naturally gave way to these rehearsals as a band, these like actual band practices. And they just needed somebody to make cohesion happen. Like, it's really hard to ask a bunch of people with like different musical experience to come in and learn a whole catalog of music, which is already a hard thing to do, and act at the same time, like kind of be in character at the same time. And then also, pay attention to what the other 5, 6 people around you are doing on stage. I mean, that's like a really high level of musicianship, to be able to sort of ignore the technical elements that you need to take care of on your instrument so that you can spend time just paying attention to everybody else. So it was helpful to have, that's kind of where music director comes in, I guess, is like
Kind of coordinate all of that.
to bring everybody together. Yeah. So my role as guitar coach, bass coach, was really naturally just evolved into my role as music director. And I was really grateful that the cast, wanted me there to continue to help them in that way. That was a really neat moment, which also eventually gave way to their becoming a real band, as we went forward with rehearsals. And at a certain point, they asked for some more autonomy. Like, hey, that was helpful. Now we want to run our own rehearsals. And man, I mean, so cool to just watch that evolution and be there to support, alongside Frankie Pine and alongside Sam Stallings and alongside Kane Rashad and Malcolm Cray and Evan Vidar. These are all our coaches, our whole music team, our music supervisor. These people were all there all day, every day, pretty much with the cast. Just sort of every day was a little different, like the cast's needs changed as we went forward. And we did our best to just sort of support them and let them take care of the rest.
So my other question, kind of like related in this area, when you're doing the coaching and you're kind of teaching, this is kind of the style, this is the riffs that they might have been playing during this period, and like you're trying to create, a little mini band. While that's going on, do you have the music that you're already like ahead of time, and so you're teaching them the actual songs that they're going to be playing, or are you guys practicing first and then learning the songs?
It was a little bit of everything, honestly. When I first came on board, Blake had a good amount of the music, at least written and sort of recorded in a cursory sense, where, I mean, some of the recordings that you hear on the show or on the Aurora record that is amazing, it's finally out. A lot of that stuff has been recorded for a long time, like since I got there, but a lot of it wasn't. Some of the songs were being written as we were, mid rehearsals, mid lessons and all that stuff. And so the really neat thing was that rehearsals and lessons were happening across the street from the studio, Sound City Studio, where Blake and Tony and a whole host of amazing writers and musicians were actively just working on this music for the show, this repertoire. And because of that, I was able to go, across the parking lot and go, hey, Blake, I think this is what you're doing, but, check me before I go and try and teach this to somebody. So, the whole goal was like, let's not try and teach anybody in the cast more than one way of doing something if we can avoid it. Like, oh, it's actually in this tuning, or, oh, it's actually different capo position, or, different position on the neck. We wanted to just make it straightforward and sort of as simple as it could possibly be as a challenge. And so when the music was being written and recorded at the same time, it just gave us this opportunity to go across the street, and whether it was sit in on a session or just sort of, get Blake's attention for a minute, just have some help in making sure that we knew exactly what was going on. But a lot of it was just like, I'd be sent a song and sort of be asked simultaneously to just teach it. So there was a lot of like in one ear, process it, try and learn a part, deliver it to the cast member, and really exhilarating and challenging just from a, lots of music all at once kind of standpoint. And it helped me. I became a better musician through this process, because anybody who's ever tried to listen to something that specifically that Blake has done, on the guitar or as a producer, and this is just so rich with Blake's mastery of all this different music. But anybody who's ever tried to dissect that and learn it knows, he's got a certain feel and a certain mastery on his instrument and his production style that isn't so easy to just figure out. So it was so neat to not just be able to go to him directly, but also to be presented with this music and just sort of take it for what it is and have this just special opportunity to hear it before anybody else heard it and, get under the hood with everything. And here I am, like, I've never been a part of the music side of a television show. I've never been a part of a television show or the film industry, anything like that before. Brand new to LA. And, I didn't know Blake coming in. I didn't really know Tony that well coming in. I didn't know Frankie Pine coming in. All these people just surrounded me, and everybody, involved with love and support, in the ways that they individually can. And what happened was we sort of found our lanes as we went, and the cast just blew our minds at every turn. I mean, with their willingness to really show up every day. I mean, and it was really every day for a couple of years that we did this to prepare. When I started, it was like, all right, man, like, do your best. We've got 2 months and then shooting is going to start. So, here's the material and here's the most of the cast. And do your best, and we'll just see what we have to do. We'll use movie magic if somebody isn't up to snuff. Ultimately, we didn't have to do anything like that because, of course, COVID had an effect deeply on everybody and everything, every tour, every show, every this, every that. But there was no stopping this thing. I mean, like, we went Zoom and FaceTime lessons like in March 2020 right away. It was just, full steam ahead, just at the same pace, but just remotely. And the cast really had many opportunities, I think, to sort of back away from this as a major unknown. Like the ask was, hey, keep showing up, keep practicing every day, keep getting better, take advantage of this time. We have no idea how long this will last. Is it going to be a month where we're shut down? Is it going to be a year? Who knows? Everybody was right there with it. It was amazing. It inspired the people like me and Frankie and Blake, everybody sort of on the other end of things, on the side of the camera, to just keep pushing, keep pushing forward and take advantage of the moment that we had.
It's such a cool experience to hear a lot of the behind the scenes, because there is so much work that goes into it, and to find out that these actors are singing and are playing is huge. And I know what it means because I've interviewed so many, people on television shows that have had to learn a skill or whatever it is. You want to learn it to a point where they always say the muscle memory, right? Where
Right,
you just don't
exactly.
even think about it. You're just playing, it so well that now you can act, now you can do other things, you could be in the
Right,
moment and not have to worry. And
right.
that was your job, was to help them have that in their brain so that they wouldn't have to kind of worry about it.
So that they could use this trade, this craft of playing an instrument. But, I know Suki had played a little bit of keyboards, but really not much. And, Seb had played drums, but not in a while, and Will with guitar, same thing, not in a while. Everybody came together, found this common ground through the material, the music and the script and sort of what they were together. This whole world that was sort of built around, in the book. And that common ground allowed them to strengthen one another to the point where they began to see not just themselves as their own, oh, Eddie is a bass player, Graham is a lead guitar player, but to see each other that way too. And I think that sort of echo chamber, that confined space of everybody seeing everybody else in the cast kicking a whole bunch of butt and working really hard, it created this really neat sort of positively competitive and just driven, ambitious atmosphere where the end result was not just people who knew enough to abandon the thought of playing in order to service the acting, but to use their ability as a musician for their acting. It became a whole part of, it's a major part of the show, as everybody will see. There's so much music, so much live music, so much studio stuff and writing scenes, and it's all really them knowing what they're doing, even if you're not hearing, the idea of recording a band live on set with live audio just presents so many tricky things, quiet as can be on set. If there's going to be any live audio, music happening, it has to be recorded in a way that is clean enough to then spruce it up for the final thing. So a lot of the job was syncing, movements to the pre-recorded music. But make no mistake about it, they learned every second of those songs and their parts within those songs, because some of the songs are 5 minutes long, but the scenes might be a minute, a completely kind of abridged and condensed version of that song. So not a linear go from the intro until a minute and a half has happened, but half the intro, skip right to the third verse, outro,
Yeah.
really discombobulated sort of cuts, which is standard for this kind of thing, in a show, I learned along the way, but not so easy to sort of ask people to then do one more big thing with this knowledge of the song, which is consolidate it and make a new song with a new form and new transitions, So that whole thing of the players seeing each other as their characters as we went on more and more, and the confidence that built allowed them to have each other's backs, and cue each other and watch each other for the cues. When you see them play together, the cool thing about this show is that you're not going to be seeing a contrived moment to moment interaction. You're going to be seeing what a band does when they're on stage and they're trying to figure out what they're doing. They're trying to make sure they can hear each other. These things were not approximated. These things were actually lived. We had the opportunity to allow them to stretch out over the course of 2 years and become a band and have disagreements like a band and have fun like a band and have, overcome challenges as a band and prepare for gigs like a band. It became more and more difficult kind of for me to go wait a minute, this is a TV show, right? So it started to feel more and more like music directing or MDing a band prepare for tour. And I had to keep reminding myself there's this visual element too that's a pretty big important part of the process. And Frankie Pine, who is the music supervisor on this show and a complete legend in the field, brings so much energy and also so much wisdom and insight to this process, and helped me figure out how to keep the most important salient points in mind. This is a TV show, man. Make sure that that's what's in your view the whole time. All the music they're playing is great, but then it also does have to translate on camera. So sometimes there were things that they were playing correctly, but it didn't look right. And we had to find a way to visually match things. It's like wormholes of just trying to keep it real, not just believable. We're not trying to fool anybody because nobody needs to be fooled. They know what they're doing, but just to make it visually compelling, I guess.
There's so many things and there's so many different elements that you have to put together. From what you were saying too, I saw some photos online of band camp, which I love
Yeah.
seeing kind of
Yeah.
everyone chilling. What was really funny is like you kind of see the progression a little bit in some of the photos that they posted, because some of them are kind of like, all right, learning. There's a whiteboard up with some notes and things like that.
Yeah.
So I saw all of those. And then you start
Yeah.
seeing like the photos change from the actors individually. I was laughing. Sam has his hair like in a ponytail and he's trying to like practice and play. The photos kind of mimic what you say, because they go from like individual kind of shots to them as a group, like, and they look like a real band. And to compare band camp to, let's say, that final scene in the show, I'm not like, I don't know if you guys filmed that last, but for the Chicago performance, when I was watching it, there's and I think this is what you're like kind of addressing, there's looks that, Sam might give or Billy will give to Riley or Daisy, and there's movements and things. And so like when you strum the guitar and he like leaves it so that the sound reverberates, that's all things that musicians do that are on stage, or like, or just like rocking out, or like the drums playing. And even when he like introduces all of them, the way that they kind of go, yeah, and like they'll play their little riff on the drum to introduce them, all of those things came out of this band camp. So when you like look at band camp and then you look at that scene like I'm talking about that happens in Chicago on the show, how is that for you as like, a coach or someone that was involved with the music, to see that dichotomy? Because camp, you're sitting on the floor, you're learning, which is like what any musician, everybody that goes on tour, everyone does it. Doesn't matter how famous you are, everybody does it. But to go from sitting on the floor, individually working, learning how to even do these instruments, how to sing, how to be on key, all of those kind of things, to that scene, which I'm using because that's like the ultimate, right? Like that's like the big kind of scene like of the show in terms of storytelling purposes, not music wise, because music it's throughout the whole thing. But look at those two. When you compare them, what does that feel like for you? Because I mean, that scene is monstrous. It's huge. And I felt like there was like nothing scripted. And I know obviously there's probably some lines maybe scripted, but it looks so real and so natural. Like I could have been at that concert.
Totally. And the truth is, being on set for moments like that with Frankie and watching the monitor as these things were happening, in other words, being fully behind the curtain, being completely aware that, they're playing to a mostly empty, gigantic room, knowing that there's cameras all around with multiple angles, knowing that this isn't real, we're still sitting there watching this in real time getting chills because we know what went into it. And it can be hard to remain objective when you're that proud of the people you've been working with. But the job of just having a super high standard for the cast and their approach to the music side of this show, that standard was met and exceeded so often by each individual and by the group that it really started to feel like I wasn't watching takes of a show, or of a scene, but I was just watching footage of a concert of a band that I really loved. At that point, by the time we started shooting, that I had been in my life for at least a year or two already. It was like very, very trippy. And so there's so much pride. There's so much, there's so much pride because we know what each individual had to sort of like overcome, each challenge that was unique to each player. Riley came in without knowing how to play guitar and had to have these intimate moments on camera with a guitar writing songs. So those scenes, watching those scenes happen was so moving because there's nowhere to hide in a scene like that. It's just, here's your close-up of you and the guitar writing a song. Right. And so that was really moving. And then, same thing, Sam really had any experience and there's so much close-up of him writing and playing in the show. But there's also just this like excitement, like I was just kept being excited for them. Because, I'm a musician. What I typically do is I help people make records, I produce, I go on tour and I play instruments with bands. That's really, really fun. And I love doing that, all that stuff. It's why I do it. And so I started to become really excited for them to sort of have these experiences too as a band. Even if it's like approximation of a tour or the approximation of a gig, it's still like, their green room routine didn't look much different than like a green room routine for a band, like a pre-show warm up, or just like everybody had their thing that they needed to sort of do to get ready, get in the zone own, and sort of two worlds just became one. It just became one thing. And I also have to say, like, all of this is possible at the like level of the musical depth of the music in the show, the whole catalog. It's all Blake just developing musical characters, creating people who didn't actually exist and inserting them into a timeline that, as guitar players and aficionados of music and whatever, like, we're familiar with this time period. It's a classic, especially guitar driven music. It's just, there's so much in there and there's so much to pick from. And yet Blake managed to create musical characters for each cast member, through the recording process that really gave each of them a musical lane. And, Will had to learn all sorts of techniques to become Graham. Like, he learned to learn how to play slide. He had to learn open tunings and finger pick. He wasn't super experienced on a lot of this stuff. And then there was like just posture, just like,
I know exactly what you're talking, like how to hold the guitar, like
how to
it's
hold the guitar. It's like, are you
yeah,
going to
because
hold it?
you want to look like a
Totally.
pro.
Look like a
And
pro from 40, 50 years ago. Like, look like
right, because they usually hold it lower, right? Like the guitar is lower for back.
lower, or just, a certain, even if the guitar is higher up, there's a certain physical vocabulary, just body vocabulary, movement vocabulary that developed through the 60s and 70s, through the time period of the show that informed what happened next. Of course, myself and the cast, like, we weren't there for that. We were just here for what happened next. So we have to go in and reach in and like kind of cherry pick these movements. And, the band had just an amazing way of developing their vocabulary as a unit as well. And we had help from this incredible movement coach, Danny Vitale. And, she came in and just helped them refine their body language and refine their specific confidences, like, per character, the way that cues would happen, the minutia of like just how you look over your shoulder, which shoulder are you looking over? When are you going to go and join, this person on their mic, for like two people on one mic moment? All these things, again, just helped them become more in touch with their own characters. But it all really stems from, of course, the writing of Taylor Jenkins Reid in the book, but then also Blake sort of taking that and running with it in his own way, in his lane as a music producer, writer, creator, and just brought it all completely to life in this incredible way. And so my job of just becoming familiar with these musical characters to be able to teach them their instruments as this character, not just teaching them these instruments or teaching them these parts and letting them run with it on their own, but like there was a lot of just, getting into the nitty gritty. Once we all felt comfortable with a basic level of understanding of the song, that's when the work sort of began, like on a deeper level. And I guess what I'm saying is that having that much to bite into from Blake, so challenging and so satisfying.
Yeah, and what's so amazing too is, when you have like a lead singer or two lead singers or a
Mhm.
bass player, I know that everyone's positioned in a different way. And like just like you said, like sharing the mic, bands make those decisions, right? But bands make those decisions after they've been together for 10 years, 20, and they know. Like
Exactly.
someone will look over, or like you'll have your lead guitarist kind of come over and play with like, your lead singer. But those are all things that you learn. So you're trying to smush all of this stuff on top of these actors that have to learn where the camera is, where their cues are, where their steps are, their lines, everything they're doing that day in chunks because nothing's filmed all at once anyway. And remember all of those things on top of everything else. So it like adds so much extra to it. Let me tell you, you did such a great job. And I know like there's a credit of a million people that were involved, but the job that you all did together was so good because I watch a million shows. I screen a million things. I obviously huge fan of the show, but what I really enjoyed, I've watched a lot of these actors before. This is their first thing, but for a couple, I've watched them for a while, like Sam and Riley I've seen. And what I found very interesting was when it started, I was like, oh, this is cool. Like they look cool. Like this is great. We're in this cool time. And then like something switches somewhere, like as you're watching it. And when it was over, I was like, oh my God, I'm so upset about this band. And then I was like, wait, like I just watched a TV show. And I was like, oh man, like I wish they would make like more music or like they would like release something else. And then I'm going, that's right. They're off to like their next project or whatever they're going to do. But you really accomplished making them into a band. There's no question. And I don't think anyone would question any of the music or any of the stuff that you guys were able to accomplish. And as a person that took music in school and like, I was in the choir and did all the band stuff, I'm looking really close, my dad plays
Right.
guitar, my brother plays guitar. And there was like not a single single thing that I could really pick out going, ooh, that's wrong. Like, I mean, pretty much everything was like right on, other than their personal decisions, which is something that every artist and musician does anyway. So, I mean, you guys just nailed it. Like, everyone just nailed it.
Well, that's teamwork. I mean, that's teamwork at like the highest level. And I mean, because really nobody showed up below the 100% level of focus and commitment. The work ethic was truly stunning. And everybody expressed it and sort of went through it in their own way, each cast member and each person behind the scenes, but ultimately it's a big team. And the bigger the team, like the harder it is to find common ground, to find the sort of cohesion that makes teamwork really possible. I mean, thank you for all of those things. Well, I will gladly just bask in the glory of that. But it's not a one person job, and it could never be. It really could never be. And this specific team became such a family through so many hours of just being together and working through things. And, Frankie has this way of making everything just so light and fun and engaging. Like, she and Sam Stallings did such an amazing job decorating the space for band camp, which was, a pretty dark and windowless, sort of dingy, old, like just labyrinth of kind of offices or classrooms.
I was gonna say it looked like a classroom with white walls.
Pretty much, yeah. Like, carpeting on the walls and, just would sort of be like a vibeless place on its own, but it was so conveniently located across from Sound City. And it was just sort of the perfect place, no-brainer place to do this. But Frankie came in and like just bedazzled everything and made everything like laid out vintage magazines from the time and like, books about these bands that we were sort of following in the footsteps of and trying to become contemporaries of, in this strange sort of way. And when you stepped into that space for Bandcamp, because of Frankie and Sam's commitment to, and this is, I think, what I really learned from both of them along the way, it's just the importance of creating a space where the cast could feel creative and the cast could feel confident and the cast could feel free to do the things and try the things that were scariest. That was the magic that Frankie and Sam brought that I sort of noticed right away was a huge part of just the energy of the space and the time that we spent together. And, as a musician, you can be really in your head sometimes about just cerebralizing music, and the job of like teaching a bunch of people at the same time to do different things on the same music is a cerebral process. There's no question, but it was so neat to have the focus day in and day out really be about a little bit more space oriented. In other words, the space that we were sharing and the comfort and the intention of the space to just be a creative place where a band could form. And it helps so much to have like other like sort of lockout rehearsal rooms adjacent to us and studios adjacent to us where there were like musicians and studios and things happening in real time around us while we were also doing band practice, so like we were just sort of plugged into this community at the Sound City complex. I think that would have been such a different experience if we were sort of more isolated and not around, and didn't have neighbors and didn't have other musicians who were walking in and out of the space. And also it would have been so different if we didn't have Frankie, to spearhead just the sheer just joy and just enthusiasm and the love for what she does. I mean, she just brings an incredible amount of energy. Bajillion hour shoots through the night where she'd be dancing on her feet to the last minute, and I'm just trying to get out of my chair and be, she just like had my ass handed to me so many times in the best way. And so just to learn from the greats, to be around that, it helped me be more present for the cast and more present for the show. And that's teamwork. It just felt like an amazing thing to be a part of that team. You don't know what's happening as it's happening. It's like hard to be cognizant on that level, but really looking back, especially now as we speak, the show is about to come out. It's a special thing. And it's like very, very clear that even though it's the only television show I've ever worked on to this point, the only thing in that industry I've ever been a part of, it's very clear to me that was special, for everyone involved. It was special and unique, and everyone brought that special, creative, unique energy and drive to it. So we got everybody's best.
Some of what you said actually remind me, ironically, I see on your table that you have a Beatles book.
Yes,
and
I do.
When they did that documentary, well, they didn't do the documentary, but pulled all that together. What you were talking about reminded me so much of that, because when people watch that, it's like 6 hours or 7 hours or something, but it starts out in a room with like random kind of a piano,
Totally.
guitar, whatever. By the like midway through, there's like rugs on the floor, lamps pulled in. So they ask for things and they'll say like, we want this, we want that. And they brought it in. And by like, if you go from like the first episode of that to the last episode, the room looks completely different. I mean, to a point where they wanted to move room and like they do, and they make changes because of the sound. So it's like you guys did everything that like every legendary band known to man has done, and you did it so well, which is why it came out so good. So I just want to do kudos to that, because I saw the book on there and I was like, oh my gosh, they did like the almost the exact same thing, and you guys got such a great result. I wanted to ask you, now that everything's kind of done, I wanted to know kind of like really super fun, maybe like quick story that happened, because I know it's so serious and there's a lot of work and there's a lot of stuff and to
Yeah.
overcome, but maybe like something like fun that you guys did. And then also what you think of it. What is it like, that it's completed, done, looking at it, and just like how you feel overall?
To that point, I actually haven't seen the show yet.
Oh my gosh.
So I'm excited just like everybody else out there for sure. I'll be trying to stay up late enough tonight to at least watch the first one or two. But man, yeah, that's an exciting time for me right now to just be about to see the full thing. I mean, of course, I've seen like isolated scenes here and there and certain things strung together, but I haven't seen full episodes or anything like that. So this is just really fantastically exciting. In terms of, stories, see, there's just so many that come up, but I know there's been some footage of that sort of preliminary concert that we did in like a rehearsal space where a bunch of people from Hello Sunshine and Amazon and Paramount and, just the music team showed up, and it was like sort of a limited invite kind of thing. I think that was neat for me because the process of preparing for that show at the time may have felt a little bit disruptive to the preparation for shooting scenes, like the closer we got to actually starting to shoot the show, the more focused we became as a whole team, on, all right, let's practice this 30 seconds of this song and this cut down of that song. And so then to go back and practice full songs to prepare to play a show, it sort of felt like another job, but it was such an opportunity to experience all of what it is to prepare for a show, to put together a set list, which they did, on their own, to sound check and, sort of show up early to the space and get comfortable, and all these like micro experiences that go into these hours that lead up to a show. And then, the excitement that fills the room as people get into their seats and come in and start mingling, and, the nerves that arise at the last minute as you're about to walk on. I mean, the whole thing, like just the huddle up right before the show started, all of that happened. It wasn't like a band and it wasn't like a show. It was a show. It was a showcase. It was a band doing their first showcase, which is nerve wracking for any band, at any stage, to just sort of like have this incredibly intimate moment with an audience. And especially because they've never done this in front of people before. It was like, it's a big enough ask to just ask them to do this in front of cameras or in front of one another, but then to put them in front of an audience of people, and an audience of people who are sort of like there every step of the way, know the music, or maybe not even know the music, but just know the story, know the characters. They all got nervous together. They all kicked butt together. They all figured it out in real time together. And that clip of, Sam introducing each person in the band, like you said,
I know, I love that clip. And then he goes, and I'm really fucking done.
Right, exactly. And like watching them all step into the sort of like energy of their characters, that was like, I think that's kind of when the shooting process began, even though it hadn't truly started yet. It was like, okay, this is happening before our very eyes. Like this cast just became a band. These actors just became musicians, these executives just became fans. All of it happened at the same time. And I can just remember sitting at the back of the room with Frankie Pine and Sam Stallings and just beaming with pride. Sam was mixing the show, from the front of house, and it felt like mixing a band. It felt like being on tour with a band. And then after it was done, there's that big come down, it's just, all of it was real. And I think that for people who are watching the show, and there's so many ways to sort of fake it with technology and CG and all this stuff, just know that like everything you're feeling is elicited because they put in the work. They really became the people who you're seeing in the show. And it's just an honor to be part of that.
Well, I will gladly take any additional footage you have of that night, because I did see that video and I was like, oh, that's so cool. And I thought at first it was from the show. And then when I read about it, I was like, oh no, this is from like a showcasing that they were doing. So even thought it was the show. I mean, like, that's how good like they were. I appreciate you talking to me and explaining everything, because I don't know if people realize how much work. I know, like, for actors, people realize, it's 16-hour days and da da da. But when you add any type of element where you need to learn something, specifically to me, I feel like when it's an instrument is so much harder, because music is its own language. So, like, to learn all of that and act and do all of the things that they had to do and be a band and come together just like blows my mind. It's like too much. It's like too much to
Yeah.
just try to understand. But like literally it all worked. And when I literally was sitting down and I was going to watch one episode, and after the first episode, I was like, well, all right, like I'll watch the next one. I literally sat, watched them all. And then I was going back to scenes where they were playing some of the songs because the album wasn't out yet. And I was re-listening and I was like, oh, this is such a good song. And like I was like so into it. And I don't know if you know this, but the album I think is #1 already.
I
Just
saw that.
today, which is crazy. I mean,
iTunes US, yeah. This is the other thing. Like, it's just that record stands alone as just like something that absolutely could have been of the time. It's a band that absolutely, like, I think it will actually confuse a lot of people, because it's so real. The way it was recorded, the way that the writing process was approached, all of that stuff that was in Blake's domain, and the incredible Joseph Lorge, who I don't know if he mixed the whole record, but certainly engineered pretty much everything. Like, that team of people went so far into that time period to explore the recording processes. It was an opportunity for everybody to just geek out really hard on things we were passionate about, music, and a decade or two of music that we all shared a deep passion for. And I think the end result is like, it's so convincingly of that time, and the writing is such high caliber. Like, it might be confusing.
I know. I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm so jealous, because if I was there, I would have been nerding out too. Like, because
Right.
it's amazing. I know that that's the story, but I was kind of like, shoot, like I really want more music and more stuff and like more things from them. So I think you guys accomplished it, and I don't know how you did it, but I commend you because I love it, as you could probably tell. And I'm a huge music geek, and you guys just nailed it all together. All of you nailed
Thank
it.
you, Monica. That's really, really sweet. It means so much. It almost feels impossible to like cover the whole experience.
And I want to thank you. I know, like, and again, everybody I always talk to gives credit to a million people, and I'm not discrediting them. I know that there's a million people that makes everything happen, but the
Really.
stuff that you did is beyond, which is why, like, I originally reached out to you, and I just want to commend you and congratulate you because it's just that good. So
I can't wait. Thank you so much.
you.
That really means a lot. It's a pleasure. It was an incredible experience.
Hope you guys enjoyed listening to Ryan talk about what it was like working with the actors, teaching them how to use the musical instruments, and giving us some behind the scenes of band camp. So make sure you check out Daisy Jones and the Six, which is available to stream on Prime Video March 3rd. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you're updated on all of our latest podcasts, and head over to our YouTube channel, hit subscribe so you're updated on all of our video content.